Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some of my favorite weird news stories from the past few days. So the first story, Vincent van Gogh painting was stolen during the Dutch coronavirus lockdown. Vincent van Gogh once said, "The diseases that we civilized people labor under most are melancholy and pessimism." Hi, you can hear those in my voice right now. Perhaps the COVID-19 disease should be added to that list that Mr. Van Gogh named after thieves labored through the coronavirus lockdown in the Netherlands to steal one of Van Gogh's paintings from an art museum. The artwork was stolen on Monday from the Singer-Laren Museum outside of Amsterdam, according to Netherlands police. The break-in triggered an alarm at around 3:15 a.m., the police said, and then they showed up, and the thieves had already escaped. The painting was called Spring Garden, the Vicarage Garden in Noonan in the spring. It was the museum on loan, or it was at the museum on loan from another museum in the area. The museum has since been closed it has been closed since March 12th amidst the lockdowns to prevent the spread, obviously. I'm shocked and unbelievably annoyed that this has happened, said Jan Rudolph Delorme, Singer-Laren Museum, in a statement. Evert van O's museum general director says that he was angry, shocked, and sad to learn of the theft. Police are appealing to nearby residents for security footage of the incident. Van Gogh, who struggled with mental illness throughout his life, was staying with his parents when he painted Spring Garden in Noonan in 1884. He was 31 years old at the time. Look at that. Look at that, boys. There's hope for you yet. The value of the painting is unknown. However, I did love that, like, in Europe, you know, it's not like they're not raiding grocery stores. They're not holding guns to people in grocery stores. You know, they're not like beating each other up for toilet paper. What they're doing is stealing prized artwork to try and make a buck off of it. It's the most like classy crime, and it's just ridiculous. Let's see what else is going on here. You know how people have been reacting kind of stupidly to coronavirus, and the internet has created a new word for it. They're calling people that are still going out and partying and hoarding and being selfish, they're calling them COVIDiots. Love it. Appears to be bringing out the worst in a certain amount of people. The term has actually made it into the Urban Dictionary, an unofficial crowdsourced repository for pop culture slang, for those of you that don't know. The two definitions of COVIDiot are someone who ignores the warning regarding public health or safety, or person who holds goods and denies them from their neighbors. People have been sharing photos on Instagram and tagging them COVIDiots of, very various things, including a University of Tampa had 5 students test positive for the virus, and the students continued to travel on spring break. So, good things, Guys, hi. Take this seriously? Okay. We have loads of weird stories today. We're going to get started. I mean, we've already gotten started, but let's start in with another one. Guys, so many of these stories were, I was, taking a look at just some regular news. Normally when I do this one, I kind of dig into the depths of weird stories and try to look on some various websites to find the oddest things. And a lot of these were just straight up front page of a Canadian newspaper. So times are weird. All right, let's get into it. So, okay, we did the Van Gogh, and now a man kills his mother and daughter 23 years apart in the same mansion. This, shocking, obviously, to say the least. An Arkansas woman has been slain in the same mansion and by the same man who murdered her mother 23 years earlier. Martha McKay, 63, was found dead inside the historic Snowden House in Horseshoe Lake, Arkansas on March the 25th. According to County Sheriff Mike Allen, Travis Lewis, 39, fled the house when deputies showed up on the scene, but he fell into a nearby river and died. So he was observed going into the water and never came back up, Allen wrote. Fish and wildlife officials eventually found the body using sonar, paper reports. Police say that Lewis was the only suspect in McKay's murder. Both bodies are expected to undergo autopsies to determine the causes of death. Lewis was paroled from prison in 2018 after serving 23 years for fatally shooting Martha's mother, Sally McKay, and their relative Lee Baker back in September of 96 in the same house. Lewis was 16 at the time, although he was charged as an adult. Sally McKay was 72, and Baker, a noted blues musician, was 52. The historic house served as both a wedding venue and a hotel, home for the influential Snowden family, which has deep roots in the area. The house's website includes photos of the family throughout the years, including images of Sally and her mother, Martha, as a child. Martha's owned and managed a home since 2005, according to articles published in the house's website. Isn't that the most shocking little? I mean, what? Why did you let him into the house? What made you think that he was going to redeem himself this time? It's pretty awful, pretty shocking. Like an episode of Tiger King. Just when you think it's weird, it just gets, you're like, okay, there's no way that this can get any weirder, and then it does, So I wanted to share with you guys some other weird, crazy coincidences that have happened in history over time. But of course, we need to take a break. So when we come back, we're going to talk about all of those weird coincidences over time throughout history. So stay tuned for that. Definitely don't go anywhere. and we'll talk to you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about a crazy coincidence in which a man killed his mother and his sister 23 years apart in the same mansion. Just like an insane, like eerie fate thing. Anyway, he ended up passing away. Right. But the point is that I wanted to talk about some other crazy, weird coincidences, eerie fate situations that have happened in history. So the first one that I want to talk about, the separated twins with almost identical lives. A set of twins from Ohio were separated at birth and grew up without any knowledge of each other's existence. Their lives did, however, share a number of strange similarities. They were both named James on their adoptions. They both grew up to be police officers, and both of them married a woman named Linda. But that's not it. Each one of them had a son named James Allen. The other one also named James Allen, but one was with two L's, one was with one L. They each had a dog named Toy, and both brothers later got divorced, and both of them ended up remarrying a woman named Betty. That comes from People magazine. Was the fact checker on that one. What? That's too many strange coincidences. And doesn't it make you feel like, because obviously like two women named Linda, they might not be similar people, but two women named Linda, then two women named Benny, naming their kids the same. Absolutely insane, isn't it? That's a lot. Edgar Allan Poe, some people think that he might have had a time machine, right? Because he knew about this certain event almost half a century before it happened. In his book called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, the author describes how 4 sailors who survived the sinking of their ship were forced to eat a rather unfortunate cabin boy named Richard Parker. Although Poe claimed that the story was based on real events, that wasn't actually true. 46 years later, however, a boat did really sink, and the members of the crew who were rescued were forced to eat a cabin boy in order to survive. And the cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. Yeah. How insane is that? Like, 46 years after that happened. And he claimed that it happened. So, what's that about, right? Eerie stuff. Mark Twain apparently predicted his own death. This is either he did that or it's a major coincidence. The writer, Mark Twain, was born in 1835 when Halley's Comet was passing the Earth. It only passed once every 76 years or so, but Twain predicted that he would die on its next passing. He's quoted as saying, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835, and he said in 1909, it's coming again next year, and I expect I'll go out with it." And the writer died on the very day of its appearance. in 1910. What? It's too much, man. It's too much. Depending on how you look at it, Violet Jessup was either seriously lucky or she was a seriously bad omen. The stewardess and nurse was on the HMS Olympic when it struck the HMS Hawk. She was aboard the HMHS Britannic when it sank after hitting a sea mine. And she was also on the RMS Titanic when it sank after hitting an iceberg on the North Atlantic. And she was later known as Miss Unsinkable. The case of Anthony Hopkins, in a rather rare book. When Anthony Hopkins was preparing for his role in The Girl from Petrograd, he wanted to find a version of the book written by George Pfeffer so that he could study it before filming. But wherever he looked, he couldn't find a copy until one day he was sitting in a subway, found a copy in a carriage that he was traveling in. But that's not it, okay? Because when Hopkins later met the author, Pfeffer told them that he also didn't have a copy of the book. Why? Because he'd lent his last one to a friend who'd accidentally lost it on the subway. Very cool. I'm sure a lot of you know about this one, but the Simpsons have been known to accurately predict all sorts of things, but I think the most impressive prediction of all was the guessing that Donald Trump would become president. Didn't see it coming, but the Simpsons saw it coming in the year 2000. So that's weird. That is weird. There was a Dutch cyclist named Martin de Jong who had escaped not one but two major plane crashes in his life. He was supposed to be aboard the missing Malaysian Air Flight 370 before deciding to take a flight that departed an hour earlier. He was also supposed to be on Malaysia Air Flight 17, the one that was shot down over the Ukraine in 2014, but before changing to a different flight in order to save money. There was a man 14 years before the Titanic sinking in 1898, Morgan Robinson, a fantasy writer for the U.S., that wrote about a ship sinking in the novella called Futility. The ship's book was called Titan, but that's not the end of the similarities. The real Titanic, the Titan, was described as unsinkable. They both had insufficient lifeboats, and they all collided with icebergs in the North Atlantic. Isn't that insane? There was a strange coincidence between Lincoln and Kennedy. The two American presidents shared a multitude of barely believable coincidences. Both were killed from gunshot wounds to the back of the head. Both died on a Friday. Both died before a celebration. Kennedy assassinated the eve of Thanksgiving, Lincoln right before Easter. Each of them were accompanied by their wife and another couple, and there's more. Both had a friend called Billy Graham. Both had 4 children. Both had secretaries named after the other. Kennedy's secretary was called Mrs. Lincoln, while Lincoln's secretary was called John. And both of their successors were presidents called Johnson. What? Crazy stuff. And we'll do one more before the break. So World War I had been begun after Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo on the 28th of June in 1914. The car, which was traveling at the same time of his murder, bore a license plate with the number A111118, which is so strange about that. World War I officially ended on Armistice Day on the 11th of November 1918, otherwise known as 11/11/18. Crazy, crazy, crazy. There are a few more of these, but I'm going to do those after the break because we've got to take a break, and I don't want to start a story. If I have to stop it halfway through, it ruins the flow, you know? So we're going to have to take a break. You can think about those weird coincidences, you know? Take your little shutter. And then when we come back, we've got a few more of those stories, and then we will move on to something else. So don't you worry. We've got a packed lot of stories today. So it's going to get weird. And, bear with me because there's some freaky stuff coming up. So don't go anywhere. And talk to you after the break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, welcome back. So we were talking about some weird coincidences in history, and I'm going to keep on plugging with that because I'm enjoying it, and I hope you are. All right, so the double tragedy on the Hoover Dam. 112 deaths were associated with the building of the Hoover Dam, but that's a strange coincidence between the first and last men to lose their lives during its construction. The first man to die was a surveyor called George Tierney, who drowned in the Colorado on December the 20th, 1922, while looking for an ideal place for the dam. And the last man to die? Patrick Tierney, George's son, who also died on December the 20th, but in 1935, 13 years later. What? 13, lucky 13, baby. An American named Matthew survived the terrorist attack at the Vatican Theater in Paris by playing dead after being shot. What's more amazing is that on the 14 years earlier, on September 11th in 2001, he narrowly avoided the terrorist attack when the United Airlines plane struck the Twin Towers while he was passing the building on the way to a meeting. He's a very lucky man. The first and last British soldiers killed in the First World War are buried in Belgium's St. Symphorien Cemetery. Their graves are located just 6 meters apart, and their headstones face each other, which is a major coincidence considering that this arrangement was not at all planned. And another... On June the 20th in 1940, Soviet archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Tamerlan in what's now called Kazakhstan. Tamerlan, who saw himself as Genghis Khan's heir, was a Turco-Mongol conqueror and the founder of the Timurid Empire in Persia and Central Asia. A warning inscription on his tomb read, "Whomsoever opens my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." Clearly not superstitious, the Soviet archaeologists ignored the warning and opened the tomb anyway. 3 days later, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion of all time upon the Soviet Union. It's a weird coincidence, guys. And our final weird coincidence story. On the night of September 29th, 1888, at around 8:30 p.m., Catherine Eddowes was found lying drunk on Aldgate High Street in London. She was taken into custody and released at 12:55 a.m. when she was sober enough to go home. Upon leaving, she gave the police a fake name, Mary Kelly. The same night she was released, Catherine Eddowes was murdered by Jack the Ripper, who then went on to murder another woman, Mary Kelly. That's right. Crazy coincidences in history. Is it fate or is it just a strange coincidence that need no explanation? Who knows? All right, other weird stories that have been happening. This again was on the front page of a Canadian newspaper. A pastor was arrested for packing hundreds into a Florida megachurch amidst coronavirus lockdown. Florida sheriff's deputies have arrested a pastor for encouraging hundreds to attend his megachurch in Tampa Bay over the weekend. In an open defiance of the state's orders to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Dr. Rodney Howard Brown, head pastor of the River at Tampa Bay Church, was arrested on a warrant for charges of unlawful assembly and violating an emergency public health order. Hillsborough Country Sheriff Chad Krosner said in a conference on Monday afternoon, Howard Brown presided over hundreds of people at his megachurch over the weekend, despite the county's safe-at-home orders to avoid such gatherings where people could easily be infected by COVID-19. The sheriff said footage of his sermons were also broadcast online, which would have been fine. Just broadcasting online would have been absolutely fine. But some people need to take it too far. His reckless disregard for human life puts hundreds of people at contagion risk and thousands of residents who may interact with him this week in danger, Chronister said on Monday. Chronister says that his sheriff's deputies repeatedly tried to educate Howard Brown about the risks and the rules that he was breaking last week, but the pastor refused to speak to them or heed warnings that they passed along. Instead, he encouraged people to come and gather at their church, Chronister said. He even provided bus transportation. Howard Brown had announced his plans to defy any lockdown orders on March 18th. In a Facebook post in which he declared the church an essential service akin to police and firefighters. He then added that the church is working hard to keep everything clean. We're praying, and as our fellow Christians pray around the world, and we know that God answers prayers, Howard Brown wrote. The coronavirus has affected hundreds of thousands of people around the world regardless of faith. Last week, the U.S. had more infections than any other country in the world. Howard Brown appears to be embracing a number of right-wing conspiracy theorists about the virus, judging from posts on his Twitter account. Many of his posts downplay the threat of the virus and echo some of the U.S. President Donald Trump's scientifically shaky rhetoric. Media stirring up bigotry and hate, he wrote up on Monday. The church was shot at last night. Keep up the good work. In an earlier tweet, he said his lawyers were meeting with the authorities to resolve any issues around the safe-at-home order. The tweet was issued before his arrest was announced. Sheriff Chronister pointed out that at his press conference that Howard Brown's church regularly broadcasts its sermon online, so there was no need to bring in people to church in person for his sermons. He says it was entirely possible for the 4,000 members of the megachurch to watch from the safety of their homes. Absolutely. He also said that the sheriff's department takes on faith very seriously and has no intention of impeding people's beliefs. However, practicing those beliefs must be done safely. Not the first time that this megachurch has made headlines. In 2017, it posted a sign on the doors declaring that its congregates were armed and dangerous following a church shooting elsewhere. We're heavily armed. Any attempt will be dealt with deadly force. Yeah, we're a church and we'll protect our people, the message said. Threatening lives, that's God's will, right? It's not. Don't threaten people's lives. It's just not done. It's not a great thing to do. Okay. Please listen to the professional healthcare's warnings. This is what's keeping people. Let's try to keep people safe during this. So, please. Okay, we're going to take another break. Probably need it after that. And when we come back, we're switching gears pretty hardcore to go to a medical fetish site. And we're going to talk about what they're doing to help in this crisis. So we'll talk about that when we return from the break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back. Can't believe this is what I'm saying. We were talking about a megachurch pastor who was arrested for defying state orders and getting thousands of people together at his megachurch amidst the coronavirus lockdowns. And now a medical fetish site donates its scrubs to help UK hospitals fighting coronavirus. Kind of beautiful. So the company donated its entire stock of scrubs to a UK hospital desperate for supplies during the outbreak. MedFet UK supplies doctor scrubs typically used as costumes for those with a particular affinity for medical role play in the bedroom, but after being contacted by the National Health Service amidst the shortages of basic hospital protective gear, the company decided to give up all of their stock to help out. Isn't that beautiful? MedFet UK confirmed with Global News that it did, in fact, give away all of its stock for the good cause. In a series of tweets posted on Friday, the company said, "Today we donated our entire stock of disposable scrubs to the NHS. It was just a few sets because we don't carry large stocks, but they were desperate, so we sent them free of charge." Posted the message along with a stock image of the classic light blue hospital gowns universally worn by doctors and nurses worldwide. While MedFet UK says that it doesn't usually do politics on Twitter, it concluded with another tweet that reads, "When you see someone from the government saying the NHS is getting what it needs, that's a lie. We have been contacted this week by representatives of the NHS procurement all over the country trying to secure basic protective equipment and clothing." Continued, "When we, a tiny company set up to serve a small section of the kink community, find ourselves being sought out as a last resort supplier to our National Health Service in a time of crisis, something is seriously wrong. In fact, it's scandalous." So when it's all over and the doctors and nurses and staffers have done an amazing job, as they undoubtedly will despite the circumstances, let's not forget or forgive the ones who sent the NHS into this battle with inadequate armor and one hand tied behind its back, the company finished. The British Medical Association said it's been inundated with concerns over the lack of protective equipment for doctors and nurses on the COVID front lines, Newsweek reports. "We simply cannot and should not ask people to be on the front line without the protective equipment they need," said Robert Jenrick, Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, during a Sunday press conference. We have a clear plan to ensure that those serving in the country at this time have the right equipment. Nearly 20,000 people have contracted the virus in the UK as of Monday, including the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And in other news, we're just going to keep trekking along because there's so much going on right now. Fearing the coronavirus is the end of the world, a thief returned their stolen ancient artifacts. So that's kind of interesting. A man who stole a 2,000-year-old ballista stone from an archaeological site in Jerusalem in 2005 has returned the long-lost artifact to Israeli authorities, citing apocalyptic fears of the coronavirus pandemic. The anonymous man arranged to have the stone returned because he feared the end of the world is near. The Israeli Antiques Authority said in a statement on Facebook, the thief feared catching COVID-19 and didn't want the stone weighing on his conscience any longer. According to Moshe Maines, who returned the stone on the thief's behalf. You are connected and know what to do with it, the thief told Maines, according to a post on Maines' Facebook account. Anybody else starting to think it was Maines? The melon-sized stone was once used in the Roman siege of Jerusalem around 70 CE, according to Israeli Antiques Authority. Romans would load the stones into large siege weapons called ballistas, then hurl them at the besieged city. The thief grabbed the stone when visiting the national park, city of David, as a teenager, Maine said. He married, raised a family, and he told me for the past 15 years the stone is weighing heavily on his heart, Maines wrote in Hebrew. He says the thief recently came upon the stone when cleaning his house for Passover and decided it was the right time to send it back. Maines ultimately got in touch with Uzi Rothstein, who works at the Israeli Antiques Authority, to send the ballista stone back to its rightful place. We commend the return of the artifact and its appeal to anyone who has taken archaeological artifacts to take the weight off their heart and return it to the state treasury. Those artifacts, which are thousands of years old, are our national treasure. They tell us the story of the land and who resided here before us and should be documented and displayed. It's not the first time that the ballista stone has proven too heavy for someone's conscience. Actually, back in 2015, an anonymous thief returned 2 ballista stones back to Israel Antiques Authority, said that he'd stolen 20 years earlier. And he left a note saying that he felt cursed by them. There are 2 Roman ballista balls from Gamla, from residential quarter at the foot of the summit. I stole them in July 1995, but since they've brought me nothing but trouble, he wrote, please do not steal antiques. Crazy, crazy stuff. You know? Things weighing on your conscience. Now's the time to get them off, right? Now's the time good as any. Some people are calling this the end of the world. I mean, we can't think like that. We can't be that negative because we'll never get through this if we're that down on everything going on. So let's try to remain positive during this. I think that's quite important right now. For those of you that have any questions about COVID-19 right now, health officials have cautioned strongly against all international travel. Returning travelers are legally obligated to self-isolate for 14 days. Some symptoms include a fever, a cough, difficulty breathing, similar to cold or flu. Some people can develop a more severe illness. People most at risk of this include older adults, people with severe chronic medical conditions like heart, lung, or kidney disease. If you develop symptoms, please contact your public health authority. Just make sure that you're frequently washing your hands and coughing into your sleeve. Do not contact others. Maintain a social distance if you absolutely must. When we come back, we're going to talk about a weird thing that a person was doing in the New York subway. That's news now, apparently. Anyway, we're going to talk about that when we return from the break.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. All right, so before the break, we were talking about, a lot, really, with the coronavirus. There's just so much going on, you guys. Here's another thing happening. New York City subway surfer hangs outside of the moving train. That is one way to social distance. A shocking video was shared on Twitter on Wednesday by social media user @ProgressiveAct, showing a New York City man hanging from the side of a moving subway. Now, just to confirm and preface this and save our butts, don't do this. We do not condone doing this. This is a story that we are reading out. Treat it as a story. Do not do this. Okay. So one person said, "This is crazy." In a tweet, a guy riding outside the train, hanging on a window. The BS us workers have to deal with during the pandemic. A mask-wearing subway rider inside the car appears to be reasoning with the man hanging on the window, encouraging him to hold on as the subway goes over a bridge. Ooh. Metropolitan Transportation Authority spokesperson deemed the behavior ridiculously dangerous. That's an understatement. Is ridiculous, dangerous behavior at any time, and in the middle of a pandemic, it distracts police officers from efforts to keep people safe, spread out, and healthy, Tim Minton told the New York Post. That's unacceptable. The NYPD Transit Bureau, according to the Post, is investigating the situation that police officials said occurred on Train 2 at the Bronx at an unknown time. In New York State, they've been hit the hardest by COVID-19 in the states. These stats are actually quite out of date. But we know that they're quite high. In fact, there is more than 67,000 cases and more than 1,300 deaths in New York State alone. And on Wednesday, a makeshift morgue was set up in Bellevue Hospital. The city's police, their ranks dwindling as more fall ill, were told to patrol nearly empty streets to enforce social distancing. As there is nothing more important right now. Public health officials have been hunting down beds and medical equipment and put out a call for more doctors and nurses for fear of the number of sick will explode in a matter of weeks, overwhelming the hospitals the way that it has done in Italy and Spain. New York University offered to let its medical students graduate early so that they could join the battle as well. So that's good. There will be help on the way from those new people on the front lines. That was a bit of a grim little thing to end this segment on, so I'm not going to end it there. And instead, I'm going to tell you that a 101-year-old Italian man has recovered from the coronavirus and released from the hospital. The man, referred to as Mr. P, left the Rimini hospital on Thursday after being admitted a week ago. The family brought him home yesterday, Lizzie told Italian publication Rimini today, to teach us that even at 101 years, the future is not written. His quick recovery has been deemed truly extraordinary and gives hope for the future. Not only did he survive the disease, he also survived the Spanish flu pandemic, which killed between 20 and 50 million people around the world. Italy has been brutally hit by COVID-19. And as of Thursday, Rimini itself had registered 1,189 cases of the virus. Of course, that was Thursday, so who knows anymore. Time is ridiculous now. Now, the Venice Canal has run clear for the first time in years. So we're trying to focus on the good stuff for this. Nitrogen, between January 1st and March 12th, concentrations of nitrogen dioxide produced by cars and power plants fell immensely over Italy, according to ESA's Centennial 5P satellite. So because health officials have cautioned against international travel, there has been far fewer emissions than normal. So, yeah, there you go. So there are some good things happening. I hope you guys have been looking at some of the more positive news stories as well. You can check out our America Still Beautiful podcast, where we talk about some of the positive things happening. Just go online, just Google it. John Krasinski has a channel now called Good News something, where he breaks down a couple of the good news stories. And just go and watch some of the videos, There's videos of people singing from their balconies, and my favorite thing to watch is the people applauding the shift changes for hospital workers as they switch over from one to the next, because they are the soldiers on the front lines of this right now, and they're risking their lives and the lives of their loved ones every day to go in and fight this thing. I have a very close friend who's a doctor in the UK, and he posted a video on social media saying that he could not get a parking spot at the hospital, and that if anybody had a bike he could borrow while this was happening, that would be great. And it was shared so much that a shop saw it and just gave him a very expensive bike just for free, just so that he could get to work and back without having to worry about parking. People are doing the healthcare officials. I can't say enough about. They're saving us. So go thank your healthcare professionals and the grocers. Good God, they're keeping us all alive. Thank them, tip them, do everything you can for them. I mean, don't, touch them because social distancing. But anyway, we'll get back to dumb stuff. When we come back, we're going to talk about an astrophysicist doing a dumb thing. So stay tuned for that. All right.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hey guys, welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about thanking your healthcare workers right before the break, actually. Just do that. Do that all the time. Just do nice things for them. Go clap for them. You know. Anyway, an astrophysicist got a magnet stuck up his nose while inventing a coronavirus device. Yeah, that's right. They could be as dumb as us. An Australian Dr. Daniel Reardon ended up in the hospital. Yeah, that's right. Taking one of the hospital beds after inserting magnets into his nostrils while building a necklace that warns you when you touch your face. Yeah. So he got 4 magnets stuck up his nose in an attempt to invent this device to stop people from touching your faces, as that's one of the things that they advise against. Dr. Daniel Reardon, a research fellow at Melbourne University, was building this necklace that sounds an alarm upon facial contact. When the mishap occurred on Thursday night, 27-year-old, there you go, astrophysicist who studies pulsars and gravitational waves says that he was trying to liven up the boredom of self-isolation with 4 powerful neodymium magnets. I have some electronic equipment, but really no expertise or experience in building circuits or things. Well, we can tell. I had the part that detects magnet fields, and I thought that if I built a circuit, I could detect the magnet field. We wore magnets on our wrists, and we could set off an alarm if you brought it too close to your face. Bit of boredom and isolation made me think of that. However, the academic realized the electronic part, he had done the opposite, and it would only complete a circuit when there was no magnetic field present. I accidentally invented a necklace that buzzes continuously unless you move your hand close to your face. After scrapping that idea, I was still a bit bored. Playing with the magnets. And it's the same logic as clipping pegs to your ears. I clipped them to my earlobes, and then I clipped them to my nostril. And then things went downhill when I clipped the magnets to my other nostril. Reardon said he placed 2 magnets inside his nostrils and 2 on the outside. When he removed the magnets, the 2 stuck together. Unfortunately, the researcher then attempted to use his remaining magnets to remove them. At this point, my partner, who works at a hospital, was laughing at me. I was trying to pull them out, but there's a ridge at the bottom of my nose you couldn't get them past. After struggling for 20 minutes, I decided to Google the problem and found an article about an 11-year-old boy who had the same problem. The solution was to put 2 magnets on the outside to offset the pull from the ones inside. as I was pulling downward to try and remove the magnets, and they clipped onto each other. I lost my grip, and those two magnets ended up in my left nostril, and the other was in my right, and then I'd run out of magnets. Before attending the hospital, Weirden attempted to use pliers to pull them out, but they ended up being magnetized by the magnets inside his nose. Every time I brought the pliers close to my nose, my entire nose would shift towards the pliers, and then the pliers would stick to the magnet. It was a little bit painful at this point. I mean, dude. My partner took me to the hospital that she works at because she wanted her colleagues to laugh at me. The doctors thought I was quite funny, making comments like, "This is an injury due to self-isolation and boredom." At the hospital, a team of 2 doctors applied an anesthetic spray and manually removed the magnets from his nose. When they got the 3 out of the left nostril, the last one fell down my throat. He said, "It could have been a bit of a problem if I'd swallowed or breathed in, but thankfully I was able to lean forward and cough it out. Needless to say, I'm not going to play with magnets anymore." Guys, don't do that. Don't do stupid things like that right now. You know, we can't afford the hospital beds being given out to dumb idiots like astrophysicists in Australia, apparently. You know, we need to take a pause on our stupidity for the time being until, you know, this has subsided. Medical records from the emergency department said that Reardon did not have difficulty breathing and denied further presence of magnets up his nose. The astrophysicist, I just love that it's an astrophysicist, don't you? Doesn't it make you feel better about yourself? The astrophysicist told The Guardian Australia that he'd ruled out further experiments with the magnets and face touching, and he'd find other ways to pass the time when at home. "I'm actually going to get a lot of work done," he said. "Working remotely, not that bad. We're also renovating our house, and I'm building shelves, making furniture, and doing some tiling. Let's hope he doesn't put any tiles up his nose. It'd be dumb." Wow. Oh, what a whirlwind of stupidity this one has been. There's a lot going on in this world that either makes me sad about humanity or, you know, gives us, well, it gives us a moment of fun, doesn't it? Bit of fun. All right, so that's gonna be it for today's episode. So thank you for listening to all of these weird things. Thank you for listening to the Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a nice review. Rate the episode. That really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on the social medias of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Keep social distancing. Keep washing your hands. Stay away from crowded places. Stay safe. Stay in your homes. Sanitize. Wash. And I will talk to you soon. Good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies business to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.